The wind howls to the mist-covered fields of Runnymede, an unyielding force that bends the tall grasses as if attempting to erase the past. The air is damp and chill, carrying the scent of wet earth, of the distant river that snakes through the land like a forgotten artery, pulsing with the slow rhythm of time. In the gray expanse of the morning, the sound of the wind is broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the far-off creak of a tree's branches. Above, the heavy sky hangs low, the clouds thick with the weight of something yet to come. In this desolate clearing, beneath the boughs of a mighty oak tree, a moment of profound significance is about to unfold, a moment that will echo through the centuries, reshaping the very foundation of power, justice, and governance. The tree, with its twisted limbs and knotted bark, stands like a silent witness to the dramas of history. Its roots are buried deep in the earth, and its branches stretch toward the heavens, as if seeking some divine approval. The oak is a symbol of endurance, of longevity, yet today it will bear witness not to the passing of seasons, but to the tension between kings and their subjects, the very birth of a new order. A lone horse, its coat gleaming black in the dim light, paws at the ground restlessly. The animal's breath forms clouds in the crisp air as it waits, as though it too can sense the gravity of the moment. The rider, a man cloaked in fur and leather, looks up from his steed, his eyes narrowing against the wind. His gaze is fixed on the clearing ahead, where figures begin to emerge in the mist, men of power, hardened by years of struggle, of blood spilled in service of a king they had once sworn allegiance to. Now, the winds of rebellion stir in their hearts, and they stand not as subjects, but as forces in their own right, demanding what they feel is owed to them. They are the barons, the once untouchable nobility who have grown weary of King John's heavy-handed rule, his greed, his oppressive taxation, his disregard for the ancient rights of the people. These have pushed the barons to the brink. The sky above seems to bear witness to their anger, the clouds swirling as if caught in the fury of their discontent. This moment, this act of defiance, is not born of single injustice, but of years of silent suffering, years of seeing their rights trampled beneath the heavy boot of royal authority. And yet, in the midst of this gathering storm, there is one man who remains apart from the rest. King John of England, the reluctant sovereign, rides into the clearing like a man facing not only the barons before him, but the crushing weight of history itself. His horse's hooves strike the earth with a rhythm that matches the pounding of his heart, a steady, relentless thrum that fills his ears and drowns out the voices of those around him. He is a king without choice, a monarch whose power has dwindled, whose authority has been diminished by his own hand. As John dismounts from his steed, his cloak flaring out behind him like a banner of defeat, his gaze sweeps over the gathering of barons. Their faces are grim, their eyes hard with the determination of men who have been pushed too far. They stand in silence, their swords sheathed but their hands clenched at their sides, their presence like a palpable force, as unyielding as the land they seek to govern. They have come to demand not just respect, but a new world, one where the king's power is tempered by the will of the people, by the ancient and sacred laws that should bind all men, even monarchs. The sound of a parchment being unrolled breaks the heavy silence. A baron steps forward, the document, already signed by many of his peers, held high in his hands. The Magna Carta, its words etched in the ancient script of the time, represents not only a legal contract, but a symbolic act of rebellion. It is the very embodiment of the barons' demand for justice, for the rule of law to be placed above the whims of a monarch. The document is heavy with the weight of expectation, a silent cry for the restoration of rights, for the assurance that no man, not even the king, is above the law. King John, his brow furrowed, looks at the parchment with a mixture of contempt and resignation. The king knows the stakes. His kingdom, fractured by war, debt, and unrest, teeters on the edge of collapse. Every word he has spoken, every decision he has made, has brought him to this precipice. His mind races, trying to find a way out, trying to find a way to maintain control. But deep down, he knows that this moment is inevitable. The barons are not asking, they are demanding, and he is too weak, too isolated, to refuse them any longer. He looks around to men gathered before him, their faces hardened by years of conflict, their lives shaped by a code of honor that binds them more strongly than any allegiance to a single monarch. These are the men who have fought for him, bled for him, and yet they stand here, their eyes filled not with respect, but with something far more dangerous, defiance. The king feels the weight of their stares, the judgment in their eyes, as if they are already measuring the distance between him and his crown. In the silence, he can almost hear the faint creak of the royal crown upon his brow, as though it, too, senses the danger that looms on the horizon. A soft cough breaks the stillness, and King John glances over to see his trusted advisers, men who have stood by him through thick and thin. Their faces are masks of unreadable resolve, but John knows that behind their stoic expressions lies a shared understanding. The battle is already lost. The barons have won. The Magna Carta, this humble document of rights and justice, will be signed today, and with it, the irrevocable shift in the balance of power. The king takes a step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the wet earth beneath him. His hands, usually steady, tremble as they reach for parchment. The moment is heavy with symbolism. This is not merely a piece of paper. It is the weight of an era's collapse, the breaking of a long-standing tradition that placed kings at the pinnacle of power above the law. As his quill touches a parchment, there is a fleeting moment of silence, a pause that stretches like eternity, before the ink spreads across the paper. It is a reluctant surrender, not a victory. The weight of it presses upon his soul, the knowledge that his power is now bound, constrained by the very men who have once pledged him their loyalty. As the quill moves across the page, the sound of the ink scratching against the parchment is the only sound that fills the air. It is a quiet, almost mournful sound, as if the king himself is mourning the loss of his absolute rule. But in that silence, there is also the promise of something new. The Magna Carta is not merely an act of rebellion. It is a turning point, a beacon for those who have long lived in the shadows, oppressed by the whims of the crown. The ink is not yet dry, but already the future begins to take shape, a future where power is shared, where justice is no longer a matter of royal decree, but of law, of mutual obligation. The wind stirs once more, lifting the corners of the parchment and sending a shiver down the king's spine. He stands there, the quill still in hand, the world shifting beneath his feet. In that moment, the river behind him seems to pause in its endless journey, the water still and silent, as if holding its breath. The birds, too, seem to cease their song, the air heavy with the weight of history. And then, as if guided by some unseen force, the king lifts his hand and lets the quill fall from his grasp. The signing is complete. The barons, their faces unreadable, exchange glances. There is no celebration here, no triumph, only the cold, hard reality of what has been done. The wind picks up once again, rustling the leaves and the parchment, as the sound of horses' hooves reverberates through the clearing. King John stands alone, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the crown he has just surrendered. But there is no comfort in the knowledge that he has avoided further bloodshed. His kingdom, once whole and powerful, now lies on the cusp of transformation. The Magna Carta will not heal all wounds, but it will serve as a monument, a reminder of a moment when power was wrested from a king's hand and placed into the hearts of the people. The oak tree, ancient and wise, watches in silence, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching toward the skies. It knows that history has turned a page, and with it, the winds of change have begun to blow, stirring the hearts of those who will shape the future. The ink on the Magna Carta dries, and the world, forever changed, takes its first tentative step into a new era. The great hall of Windsor Castle lies in the depths of twilight. A heavy silence blankets the space, broken only by the faint crackling of the hearth's embers. The towering stone walls, draped in tapestries that recount the bloodied victories and grand feasts of past kings, seem to hold their breath, waiting. The golden glow of the fire casts long shadows on the ancient floor, stretching like the arms of forgotten kings reaching toward a future they cannot touch. The air is thick with the scent of burning wood, and the faint traces of wet earth carried from the outside storm. A chill hangs in the air, a reminder that the storm outside is not just a matter of weather. It is a storm of unrest, of mounting pressure, and of a kingdom on the verge of disintegration. At the far end of the hall, beneath a vaulted ceiling that speaks of centuries of royal history, King John stands, his back rigid, his eyes dark and tired. His once commanding figure is now weighed down by the invisible burden of a crown that seems too heavy for his brow. The tapestries above him, painted with scenes of past monarchs, strong, revered, the stewards of destiny, serve as a painful reminder of what he is failing to maintain. His father, Henry II, and his brother, Richard the Lionheart, had been kings of legends, their names carved into the annals of history. Yet John, the youngest son, had always lived in their towering shadows, never quite able to step out of their formidable legacy. Now, as the storm rages outside, King John finds himself confronting a far more pressing threat than the wind. His court is filled with whispers, murmurings that seem to grow louder with each passing day. The barons, once his loyal subjects, once his strongest allies, have turned their swords against him. They have come to demand more than just loyalty. They have come to demand justice. His decisions, his refusal to listen, his insatiable thirst for power and wealth have driven them to the edge. And now, in the stillness of the hall, John can feel the weight of their gaze upon him, like 1,000 eyes measuring the distance between him and the throne. In this moment, as his advisors shuffle about nervously, he knows that his kingdom is slipping from his grasp. The Barons' rebellion is not just a fleeting storm. It is the embodiment of years of broken promises, crushed hopes, and a people grown tired of suffering in silence. He has seen their faces, their stern, resolute faces, and he knows what is coming. But even now, in the depths of his solitude, he refuses to face the reality that his reign, already fraught with war, loss, and strife, is about to take a turn for which there may be no return. "Your Majesty," a voice calls from the shadows. It is the soft whisper of the Chancellor, stepping forward with a scroll in hand. The sound of parchment rustling in his hands is a faint echo in the vast, cavernous hall, but it reverberates in John's chest like the pounding of a war drum. The Chancellor's face is drawn, weary from endless negotiations and sleepless nights, but his voice is steady and full of the somber resignation of a man who knows the inevitable has arrived. The barons have made their demands clear. The Magna Carta, their great charter, is the price they will accept for peace. John's fingers tighten around the arm of his throne, his knuckles white with tension. The name of the document sounds strange in his mouth, foreign even. Magna Carta. It is not just a piece of parchment. It is a direct challenge to the very foundation of his rule, a rule that has been characterized by an unwavering belief in the divine right of kings, by the sacred duty of the monarch to govern without question. This charter, however, seeks to strip him of his unchecked authority, to place him beneath the very laws that he has long held above others. To sign it is to surrender not only his power, but his identity as a king. The room feels smaller now, as if the walls are closing in on him. He has led this kingdom through wars and plagues, through betrayals and alliances, and yet it is this moment, this simple document, that seems poised to undo everything. His thoughts swirl in chaos. How did it come to this? How had he allowed his kingdom to fall into such disarray? For a moment, the king allows himself to close his eyes, to feel the weight of his crown pressing down upon him. The golden circlet, once a symbol of his absolute power, now feels like a chain. His thoughts drift to the events that have led him here. His brother's death, the struggle for the throne, his unrelenting pursuit of control. He had always thought of himself as a king who would carve his name into history. But now, all he has left is a fleeting sense that history is carving him out of it. "Your Majesty," the Chancellor repeats, his voice now edged with a quiet urgency. The barons are gathering. They expect an answer. The time to act is now. John turns sharply toward the Chancellor. His mouth opens, but no words come. He can see it all now. Every misstep, every decision that has led him to this precipice. His mind races, but the answer is already clear. There is no room left for pride. There is no room left for the grand gestures that might have once defined his reign. What is left is survival, to secure his throne, to avoid further bloodshed. He must bend to the will of those who have risen against him. It is a bitter pill to swallow, but there is no other choice. The Magna Carta. He will have to sign it. With a grim expression, John rises from his throne. The cold stone beneath his boots echoes in the chamber as he moves toward the long table, where the scroll lies waiting. The parchment is unrolled before him like a map of his downfall. Its edges are worn, its ink dark and steady. The clauses it contains are both simple and profound, asserting that the king is not above the law, that the barons will no longer be subjects to arbitrary rule. The weight of it is more than physical. It presses upon his chest, suffocating him with its implications. The sound of the quill dipping into ink breaks the tension in the room. The rhythmic scratch of the pen on the parchment fills the air, almost too loud in the hushed silence. John's hand shakes ever so slightly as he prepares to make his mark. His fingers trace the paper before him, feeling the rough texture of the vellum beneath his skin. In this moment, time seems to stretch, the act of signing dragging on forever, and yet it is swift. Over an instant, the ink stains the page, the quill moves across the letters, and the king's name is forever etched on a line that seals his fate. The sound of the ink settling on the parchment reverberates through the chamber like a death knell. A deep, almost mournful silence follows as King John steps back. He looks at the paper before him, now signed, now irrevocably binding. There is no turning back. The Magna Carta has been born, not in victory, but in reluctant surrender. The very idea of a king bound by the law, accountable to the barons and the people, is a betrayal of everything John has ever known. And yet it is a necessary betrayal. As the king stands there, the weight of the moment begins to settle in. His eyes flicker across the room, meeting the gaze of his advisors, the barons who have gathered in silent witness. They, too, are bound by this moment. They have won, but there is no joy in their victory. It is not a victory that will bring peace, but one that will, in time, alter the course of history. The winds that howl outside grow louder, but inside, the silence is deeper. The room feels colder now, as if the very temperature of the kingdom has shifted with the signing of this document. King John's heart is heavy as he gazes out the window, watching the storm rage outside. The rain is falling in sheets, the thunder rolling across the land like the distant roar of a beast disturbed. His kingdom is caught in the storm now, too. He feels it in his bones. This moment, this surrender, will change everything. As the chamber empties, as the barons move away, their victory sealed by his signature, the king remains in place. He stands before the table, his hands still trembling, his mind reeling. The Magna Carta is a document, a piece of paper that seems so simple, so innocuous. But in it lies the unraveling of a kingdom, the rewriting of what it means to rule. John's kingdom will never be the same. His name will forever be linked to this moment, this surrender. But perhaps, in the depths of his despair, he knows that the world is moving beyond him, towards something new, something more just, but at the cost of the old order. And as the firelight flickers in the hearth, casting fleeting shadows across the chamber, King John stands alone, not as a ruler, but as a man who has witnessed the death of the monarchy as he once knew it. The moon hangs heavy in the sky, casting its pale, silver light across the quiet land of England. The countryside is still, wrapped in the ethereal glow of the night, save for the rhythmic sound of hooves on the damp earth. A single rider moves swiftly through the dense forest, his cloak billowing behind him like a shadow, his horse's breath clouding in the crisp night air. The figure is solitary, but his purpose is clear. He carries a message, a letter that will change the course of history. His horse's hooves strike the ground in measured rhythm, a reminder of the gravity of the task ahead. This is not a message of victory or celebration. It is a call to arms, a warning of rebellion. The forest around him is dense, the trees tall and ancient, their branches creaking in the wind. The scent of pine and wet earth fills the air, the leaves rustling softly as the rider passes. His horse presses forward, its ears flicking nervously, as if it too senses the unease in the air. The path before them is shrouded in darkness, only the pale moonlight offering glimpses of the terrain. But the rider is unperturbed, his focus unyielding. His mind is fixed not on the damp earth beneath him, but on the message he carries, one that will soon reach the king's ears, setting in motion the events that will forever change the kingdom. The rider's journey is long, but as he emerges from a forest and catches sight of the distant silhouette of Windsor Castle, his pace quickens. The castle looms like a brooding giant against the horizon, its stone walls steeped in centuries of history. Within those walls, King John sleeps, or perhaps it would be more fitting to say he broods. For his reign, marked by treachery, conflict, and unrelenting greed, has brought England to the brink of chaos. And yet, in this quiet moment, as the castle stands silent under the moon's watchful eye, John's world is already beginning to crumble. The rider's mission is urgent, for the rebellion is no longer a distant threat. It is a growing storm that threatens to engulf the land. The barons, long loyal to the crown, have risen against John, and their demands are clear: justice, accountability, and a promise that the king will not remain above the law. His authority, once absolute, is now in question. The Magna Carta, this mysterious, formidable document, has already been drafted. The barons have given him a choice: accept the terms or face the full wrath of their collective power. And in this moment, King John must decide how to respond. As the rider reaches the gates of Windsor Castle, he is met by a group of soldiers, their faces grim and weary. The message is delivered quickly, passed from hand to hand, its contents known only to a few. The words are sharp, direct, and without room for negotiation. The barons have spoken. The Magna Carta will be signed, or war will come to the kingdom. The rider's task is complete, but the weight of his journey lingers in the air, heavy and suffocating. Inside the castle, the great hall is dimly lit by flickering torches, their flames dancing in the cold, stone air. King John stands at the far end of the hall, his back turned to the gathering of advisors and nobles, his figure bathed in the shadow of a vast, looming tapestry depicting scenes of kingship and conquest. His posture is rigid, his hands clasped behind his back, as if holding the weight of the world on his shoulders. The stone walls seem to close in on him, the air thick with the tension of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. His mind is a battlefield of conflicting emotions: anger, fear, and above all, a profound sense of helplessness. The rebellion of the barons is not just a political uprising. It is a personal betrayal, one that threatens to undo everything he has fought for. King John's reign has never been one of peace. His father, Henry II, had been a king who expanded the kingdom's borders through ruthless campaigns and shrewd diplomacy. His brother, Richard the Lionheart, had been a king whose name was whispered in awe across Europe, a warrior king whose legacy seemed untouchable. But John, the youngest son, the one who had spent years in his brother's shadows, was always seen as less. He had ascended to the throne through bloodshed, treachery, and the untimely deaths of those who came before him. His reign had been marked by failure after failure: wars lost in France, a failed campaign in Ireland, and above all, his unrelenting thirst for wealth and power, often at the expense of his people. And now, after years of missteps and broken promises, King John faces a rebellion that threatens to strip him of his authority, his crown, and perhaps even his life. The barons, long oppressed by his heavy taxes, his arbitrary rule, and his disregard for their rights, have finally risen. Their demands are not just for a change in leadership. They seek a rebalancing of power. The Magna Carta, the great charter they have put before him, is a direct challenge to his divine right to rule. John turns to face the gathering of nobles and advisors, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights spent worrying over his kingdom's future. The torchlight flickers against the stone, casting long shadows across his face, highlighting the lines of worry and exhaustion that have deepened with each passing day. His crown seems to weigh heavier than ever now, a constant reminder that he is the one who is supposed to hold this fractured kingdom together. Yet he feels like he is failing in every way. The room falls silent as John steps forward, his boots echoing on the cold stone floor. The advisors exchange uneasy glances, but none dare speak. The king's anger is palpable, but beneath it lies something deeper, an overwhelming sense of helplessness, the terrifying realization that his power has diminished beyond repair. His words come slowly, each one measured, as though he is trying to convince himself as much as he is trying to convince those around him. They demand a Magna Carta. John says, his voice hoarse, a document that would strip me of the very power that is my birthright. A murmur ripples through the room, but it is not one of support. The barons' rebellion is not something that can be ignored any longer. They have gathered in force, their swords drawn, their demands clear. The ink on the Magna Carta is already drying, and John knows that time is running out. His advisors, many of whom are loyal to the crown, stand in quiet opposition. They know that the Magna Carta is a death sentence for the traditional power of the monarchy, but even they see the writing on the wall. If John refuses to comply, if he stands in defiance of the barons, war will come and the kingdom will be torn apart. Even the fiercest loyalists know that John's reign is teetering on the brink. As John listens to the arguments, the weight of the decision before him seems to press down even harder. His mind races. What are the consequences of signing the Magna Carta? It would mean a loss of control, a loss of the absolute power he has held over his subjects for so long. But the consequences of defying the barons could be even worse. War would engulf the kingdom. The people would suffer, and John's legacy would be nothing but ashes. The storm outside seems to mirror the turmoil within the castle walls. The wind howls against the stone, the rain lashes against the windows, and the thunder rumbles in the distance, as if the heavens themselves are bearing witness to the decision that John must make. The sound of the storm fills the hall, a constant reminder that the fate of the kingdom lies in this moment. The king looks down at the parchment before him, the Magna Carta. The weight of it feels almost physical, as if the document itself is a living, breathing thing, pressing down on him. He reaches for the quill, his fingers trembling as he dips it into the ink. The moment stretches out, each second feeling like an eternity. He knows that this is a turning point, not just for his reign, but for the entire kingdom. With a single stroke, he will change the course of history. The quill touches the parchment, and the ink flows across the paper, the first line of the Magna Carta now sealed. There is no turning back. As the ink spreads, King John knows that his reign will never be the same. The moment of defiance, of rebellion, is now replaced by the quiet surrender of a king who has realized that his power must be shared, that even kings are bound by law. As the signing is completed, the silence in the room is deafening. The advisors, the nobles, and even the barons who have gathered to witness the event remain motionless, as though time has stopped altogether. The storm outside continues, but inside the great hall, the air is thick with the weight of history. King John stands still, his gaze fixed on the parchment. The signing of the Magna Carta has not brought him peace, nor has it secured his legacy. It is a reluctant surrender, a sacrifice that must be made for the good of the kingdom. The bells toll across the kingdom, their mournful peals echoing over the countryside, as if announcing the fall of something ancient and powerful. The wind stirs the banners atop the towers of Windsor Castle, snapping them violently in the cold air. It is a bitter wind, carried with it the taste of rain and the scent of damp stone. The castle stands in silent defiance against the encroaching storm, its towering walls and spires casting long shadows over the land. Inside, the great hall is bathed in the flickering light of torches, the fire's warmth a stark contrast to the chill creeping through the cracks in the stone. King John stands alone in the center of the hall, his back straight, but his shoulders heavy. The room around him is silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of parchment. The air is thick with the weight of the decision he must make. Outside, the sound of the storm grows louder, as if nature itself is mirroring the tempest within his heart. He can feel the pressure building, the suffocating weight of his crown, as if the very gold that encircles his brow has become a prison. He is a king, and yet in this moment he feels small, trapped, isolated in a world that is slipping through his fingers. The flickering light casts dark shadows across his face, accentuating the deep lines of worry that have carved themselves into his features. His once regal demeanor has given way to something else, a weariness, an uncertainty that gnaws at him with each passing moment. The kingdom is on the brink, its people disillusioned and its barons rising in defiance. The Magna Carta, the seemingly innocuous document, is not just a piece of parchment. It is the pulse of a kingdom that is teetering on the edge of collapse. The barons have spoken, and their demand is clear. The king must submit to the laws that bind all men, including himself. Their message has been delivered, and John knows that he must act, whether he wants to or not. The room is filled with the sound of hushed voices as John's advisors gather around him, their expressions tense, their eyes fixed on the king. They are loyal, but even their loyalty has been tested by the weight of John's decisions. His reign has been a series of missteps, broken promises, heavy taxes, failed wars, all culminating in this moment of reckoning. They know that this is no longer about the king's authority. It is about the survival of the kingdom itself. War with the barons is inevitable if John does not comply, and the people, those who have long suffered under his rule, will rise against him as well. One of the advisors, a tall man with graying hair and a weathered face, steps forward, his voice low but firm. "Your Majesty, the barons will not be swayed. They demand justice, not just for themselves, but for the common people who have suffered under your reign. They will not rest until the Magna Carta is signed." His words hang in the air, heavy with the understanding that the signing of this document will mark the end of an era when the king ruled unchallenged, when the monarch's word was law. In signing the Magna Carta, King John will forever relinquish the absolute power that has been his for so long. John's gaze flickers toward the parchment on the table before him. It is unrolled, its ink dark and bold, the words a testament to the shifting tides of power. The Magna Carta is not just a document of law. It is a symbol of the growing divide between the monarchy and the people, between the divine right of kings and the rights of men. It is a challenge to his very identity, to everything he has known as a king. The paper before him seems almost a pulse with life, as if it holds the very weight of the kingdom in its fibers. The candlelight flickers and dances, casting long, trembling shadows on the parchment, as if the fire itself is reluctant to witness the act that is about to take place. John's fingers twitch, almost imperceptibly, as if drawn to the ink on the paper. He wants to push the parchment away, to refuse, to take up arms and strike down the men who have dared to challenge him. But deep down, he knows that defiance will only lead to more bloodshed, more suffering for his people. His mind races through the events that have led him here, the bitter struggles of throne, the wars he has fought and lost, the failed promises to barons, the oppressive taxes that have drained the kingdom's resources. He has not been a king of justice, but of power, and in the end, that is what has undone him. The sound of the quill tapping against the ink pot breaks his reverie. One of his trusted advisors, a man who has served him through thick and thin, holds the quill, waiting. The advisor's eyes meet John's, and for a brief moment, they share a silent understanding. There is no escape from this moment. The Magna Carta is a new beginning, but it is also an end. John is no longer the absolute ruler of England. The world is changing around him, and he must adapt or perish. The quill, poised in the advisor's hand, is a symbol of both duty and despair. "Your Majesty," the advisor says quietly, "the barons are waiting." John's heart beats heavily in his chest, the rhythm of it loud in his ears. His thoughts swirl like the storm outside, but there is no turning back. His kingdom has been fractured by years of conflict, and this document, this act of submission, may be the only way to avoid further destruction. But in his heart, he knows that the Magna Carta is more than just a political agreement. It is a betrayal of the very power he holds, the power he was born to wield. He steps forward, the cold stone floor beneath his boots echoing through the hall, and approaches the table. The ink on the Magna Carta gleams in the candlelight, its dark fluidity, like the blood of the kingdom itself, spilled on parchment. The silence in the room is oppressive, broken only by the sound of his own breathing, slow and deliberate. His fingers tremble as he reaches for the quill. He has signed many documents in his life, decrees, treaties, royal edicts, but this one feels different. This one feels like the end of everything he has known. He dips the quill into the ink pot, the sound of the pen's tip meeting the ink like a final breath. The parchment is cold beneath his fingers, and as the quill touches the surface, it feels like the entire kingdom holds its breath. He moves his hand slowly, deliberately, as if unsure of the weight of the action. His name forms on the page, a reluctant surrender, a symbol of everything he has lost, and of what the kingdom will gain. The moment passes in an instant. The quill is lifted, and the ink dries on the paper. King John stands still, his gaze fixed on the document before him, his heart heavy with the realization that his reign has forever changed. The Magna Carta is not a victory for him, nor is it a triumph for the barons. It is an act of survival, a necessary step toward the preservation of the kingdom, but it comes at a cost. The cost is his absolute power. The cost is the very essence of kingship, now bound by the laws that govern all men. The silence in the hall is profound, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth. The advisors exchange glances, but none of them speak. There is no celebration here, no joy in this victory, only a quiet understanding that history has turned a corner. Outside, The storm rages on, its winds howling like the voices of the past, of the kings and queens who once held unchallenged dominion over England. But today, that reign has ended. John steps back, his eyes never leaving the Magna Carta. The firelight flickers across the parchment, casting shadows that seem to stretch and grow, as though the document itself is alive, changing the future of the kingdom with each passing second. He may still wear the crown, but the meaning of that crown has shifted. He is no longer the unquestioned ruler of England. The laws of the land will no longer bend to his will, but to the collective will of the people, represented in the Magna Carta. For a moment, the king stands motionless, as if awaiting some divine sign, some confirmation that this moment is right. But there is no such sign. The room remains silent, and the storm outside continues to rage, its fury a fitting reflection of the turmoil that lies ahead. King John may have signed a Magna Carta, but in his heart, the winds of change are already howling, carrying with them the promise of new order and the end of the old. He has surrendered the absolute power of kingship, but perhaps, in the end, it is the kingdom itself that has been transformed. The echoes of the storm outside reverberate in the hall, a reminder that the winds of history are always shifting, and the fate of kings is never certain. The night falls heavily upon the kingdom, a curtain of darkness that seems to pull the world into its depths. The wind howls over the land, a cruel, biting gust that sweeps across the wide, rolling plains of England. In the distance, the silhouette of Windsor Castle looms, an ancient fortress of stone and mortar that has withstood the ravages of time. Inside, the flickering light of torches casts long, wavering shadows against the cold, damp walls. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and the faint aroma of rain that had begun to fall outside, drumming softly against the roof. In the great hall, the fire crackles, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that grips the stone of the castle. King John sits at the far end of the room, his figure slumped in a chair that, in another time, would have seemed regal. But tonight, it seems only a seat of discomfort, a throne of dread. The weight of his crown, though invisible, presses upon him, its gold now a symbol not of authority, but of his unraveling. He looks across the room at his advisers, each of them standing in silence, their faces etched with worry. Their eyes are drawn not to the king himself, but to the parchment on the table before him, the Magna Carta. The room is silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire. The Magna Carta lies in the center of the table, its surface yellow with age, its ink dark and permanent. The words on the page seem to shimmer with power, as though the document itself knows that it holds the future of a kingdom within its fibers. The silence is suffocating, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in the room. This is not just a moment of political decision. It is a moment of historical reckoning. King John has been brought to the edge, and the Magna Carta is the precipice. John's mind is in turmoil, the storm inside him mirroring the tempest that rages outside the castle. His fingers tap nervously against the arm of the chair as he stares at the parchment before him. The cold stone walls seem to close in on him, the flickering shadows stretching out like the tendrils of a nightmare. His breath comes in shallow gasps, his chest tight with the knowledge that this is a moment he cannot escape. The barons, his former allies, have demanded this document, this charter that would forever alter the course of his reign. They have made it clear. Either he signs it, or they will bring the full force of their rebellion down upon him. His advisers, who once whispered in support of his every decision, now stand in a grim, expectant silence. They have seen the writing on the wall. The rebellion of the barons has been gathering momentum for months, each day bringing them closer to open conflict. King John knows that his rule, already weakened by years of war, betrayal, and mismanagement, now teeters on the brink. If he refuses to sign the Magna Carta, war will break out. If he agrees, he will have to surrender the very power that defines him as king, the divine right to rule unchecked. The weight of his decision threatens to crush him. His thoughts swirl in a haze. How did it come to this? How had he, the ruler of England, fallen so low? He had been crowned in his youth, the youngest of his brothers, the one who would inherit a kingdom fractured by the ambition and war of his father. He had fought for his crown, but in doing so, he had made enemies of those who once served him loyally. The kingdom, which should have been his legacy, has become a burden, a weight too heavy for his shoulders. The The sound of footsteps breaks the stillness, and the door to the hall creaks open. A figure enters, his face grim, his posture weary. It is one of the barons, his armor worn from the campaign, his eyes steely with resolve. The man is not here to negotiate. He is here to witness history. His presence in the hall is a reminder that the barons hold the power now, not the king. The baron's eyes flicker toward the table, toward the Magna Carta, and then back to the king. There is no need for words. The message is clear. King John stands slowly, his movements deliberate but stiff, as though the weight of his crown has become too much to bear. He looks at the baron, then at the parchment before him. His fingers twitch as if drawn to it, but he holds back, as if fearing what his own hand might do. The silence stretches, thick and suffocating, until John speaks, his voice low and strained. "I have been a king," he says, his words heavy with the burden of his crown. "But I have been a king alone. The people demand justice, and I am powerless to give it to them. The barons will not bend, and neither will I." The baron's face remains impassive, his eyes unreadable, but the words are already hanging in the air like a curse. "Your Majesty," the baron says, his voice firm but not unkind, "the kingdom will not survive another war. The Magna Carta is not just for the barons. It is for all of England, for the common people, for justice, for the rule of law." John's gaze drifts to the parchment once more. The weight of it is unbearable. He can feel the history in the room, pressing it on him. The Magna Carta is not merely a list of demands. It is a symbol of the shifting tides of power. It is a sign that the age of absolute monarchy, where the king's rule is law, is over. The world is changing, and John is powerless to stop it. The storm outside rages on, the wind howling against the walls of the castle. Thunder cracks through the night sky, the sound so loud it seems to shake the very stones of the castle. The fire crackles loudly in the hearth, the flames casting erratic shadows across the room. For a moment, it seems as though the storm itself is a warning, as though the very elements are calling for justice. John takes a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He looks at the parchment again, at the words that have been written, the laws that will bind him as they bind every other man. He thinks of his father, of the great kings who will come before him, of the legacy of royal power that he was supposed to inherit. And yet, here he stands, on the precipice of a new world, a world where power is shared, not held solely by the king. He walks slowly toward the table, his boots echoing in the silence, each step heavy with the weight of his decision. The quill lies before him, its tip poised above the parchment. He feels the eyes of his advisers, the barons, and the kingdom itself upon him. He is no longer the master of his fate. He is bound by the expectations of his people, by the tide of history that has swept him to this moment. With a final, trembling breath, he reaches for the quill. The tip of the pen touches the parchment, and the ink flows onto the page, the first stroke of the Magna Carta sealing his fate. There is no turning back now. The words flow steadily beneath his hand, his name written in the ink that will forever bind him to this moment, to this surrender. The ink spreads, each letter a symbol of a kingdom reborn, but at the cost of a king's absolute power. The room is silent, save for the sound of the quill moving across the parchment. The fire crackles. The storm outside continues its fury, and the barons stand in silent witness. The Magna Carta is no longer just a piece of paper. It is a new beginning, a new order. The king has been bound by the law, and the kingdom, forever changed, takes its first steps into a new era. As John lifts the quill from the parchment, the weight of his decision presses down on him. His shoulders sag, his heart heavy with the realization that the crown he wears is no longer the symbol of his absolute power. The Magna Carta has taken that from him. The room feels smaller now, the shadows deeper, as if the world has shifted in a way that cannot be undone. The baron nods, his expression solemn. The others in the room are silent, their faces unreadable, but the decision has been made. The storm outside begins to die down, its fury spent. The wind that once howled now seems to whisper, carrying with it the promise of change. King John stands alone, his hand resting on the parchment. His heart is heavy, but perhaps, in this moment, he knows that he has done what must be done, not for himself, but for the kingdom. The Magna Carta will be his legacy, not as a king who ruled with absolute power, but as one who, in the end, recognized that true power lies not in domination, but in shared responsibility. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and wet stone, the rain falling in steady sheets, as though the heavens themselves are mourning the passing of an age. England lies in the grip of a storm, the wind howling through the trees, tugging at the banners of the great castles at the landscape. At the center of it all stands Windsor Castle, its towering walls dark against the gray sky, a silent witness to the unraveling of a kingdom. Inside the stone walls, the great hall is dimly lit by the flickering light of torches. The shadows stretch long across the cold, worn floor, casting an eerie stillness over the room. King John stands alone in the center of the hall, his back straight, but his eyes clouded with a weight of uncertainty. The crown that rests upon his head feels heavier than it ever has before, as though it is no longer a symbol of divine right, but a burden he can barely carry. The great stone fireplace at the far end of the hall crackles with life, but even its warmth cannot pierce the chill that has settled deep within him. His gaze drifts toward the heavy oak table in front of him, where the Magna Carta lies, the ink still fresh upon the parchment. The document, the Magna Carta, has become the embodiment of his failure. It is not merely a list of legal demands or concessions from the king. It is a testament to the collapse of the old order. The rebellion of the barons, once loyal servants, now threatens to tear apart the very foundation of his rule. They have forced him into this position, demanding that he sign away his power, that he agree to a future in which kings are no longer above the law. In his heart, John knows that this moment marks the end of his reign as he has known it. The era of absolute monarchy is over, and the kingdom of England is poised to enter a new age, one where power is shared, where the crown is no longer the solitary symbol of authority. The sound of the rain beating against the stone walls is deafening, filling the room with an unrelenting rhythm, like the beating of a war drum. The flickering flames on the hearth cast shifting shadows across John's face, illuminating the strain in his features. His hand, resting on the edge of the table, trembles ever so slightly, as though the mere thought of signing the Magna Carta is enough to unsettle him. His thoughts swirl like the storm outside, dark and chaotic. His kingdom is on the brink of ruin, and there is no clear path forward. To sign the Magna Carta would be to admit defeat, to acknowledge that his power is no longer absolute, and yet to refuse would be to invite war, to shatter the fragile peace that still holds the kingdom together. John turns slowly, his eyes sweeping over the room, taking in the faces of his advisors and loyal servants. They stand in silence, their eyes downcast, unwilling or unable to meet his gaze. They, too, know the gravity of the moment, the finality of the decision that lies before him. For them, this is not just a matter of politics. It is a matter of survival. The kingdom has been at war for years, the land torn apart by conflict, famine, and disease. The people are weary, the barons are restless, and John is no longer the powerful monarch he once was. He is a king trapped by his own decisions, bound by his past mistakes, and now, in this darkened hall, he faces the consequences. A figure steps forward, an advisor, a man who has been by John's side through countless trials. The man is older, his face lined with the marks of age and hardship, but his eyes are sharp with knowledge. He approaches the table, his movements measured and deliberate, and places a hand on the parchment. "Your Majesty," he says softly, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "the barons will not wait much longer. They will not rest until the Magna Carta is signed. If you refuse, the kingdom will be torn apart." John does not respond at first. He merely looks at the parchment, his gaze unwavering. The words on the paper are simple, yet they carry the force of centuries. The Magna Carta is not just a set of laws. It is a challenge to everything John has known as a king. It demands that he relinquish control over his subjects, that he allow the barons a say in the governance of the kingdom. It strips away the divine right that he believes was granted to him by God, leaving him no more than a man bound by the same laws as everyone else. For a king who has ruled through force and fear, this is a bitter pill to swallow. "You think I don't know what this means?" John says finally, his voice strained. His words hang in the air, heavy with frustration. "Do you think I haven't seen the storm gathering? The barons no longer answer to me. They answer to themselves. I have fought for this kingdom, bled for it, and now they ask me to sign away my birthright. The advisor nods solemnly, understanding the king's pain, but unwilling to offer comfort. Your Majesty, this is not about birthright. It is about the future of the kingdom. The barons, the people, they want justice. They want a king who governs with the law, not with tyranny. The Magna Carta will ensure that the monarchy is held accountable, that no man, not even the king, is above the law. John's hands tighten around the edge of the table, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. He can feel the weight of his crown bearing down on him, as though the very act of wearing has become an unbearable burden. The fire in the hearth crackles, the flames licking at the air, casting fleeting shadows across his face. For a moment, he is lost in the flames, as though they might consume him, as though they might offer him some escape from this painful reality. The storm outside intensifies, the wind howling against the stone walls, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundations of the castle. John's gaze drifts to the window, where the rain falls in torrents, blurring the world beyond. The storm outside is relentless, but it is nothing compared to the storm that rages within him. He has spent his life fighting for power, for control, but now, in the face of the Magna Carta, he realizes that the world is changing. The age of kings, of monarchs who rule without question, is drawing to a close. The kingdom he thought he could command is slipping through his fingers, and the only way to preserve it is to sign away the very power he has clung to for so long. He turns back to the parchment, his hand hovering above it. The ink on the page seems to shimmer in the torchlight, its dark fluidity a reminder of the blood spilled for this very moment. With a sigh, John reaches for the quill. The sound of the pen dipping into the ink pot fills the room, the noise sharp and final. The quill touches the parchment, and for a moment it seems as though time itself has stopped. The king's hand trembles, but he does not pull away. The weight of the decision presses down on him, the future of the kingdom hanging in the balance. As the quill moves across the page, the ink flowing steadily, John's mind races. He thinks of his father, Henry II, and of his brother, Richard the Lionheart. They had ruled with strength and power, their names etched into the annals of history as conquerors and warriors. But John is no warrior, no hero. He is a king who has lost his way, a ruler whose decisions have brought him to this moment of reckoning. The Magna Carta is not just a document. It is a symbol of his failure, of the fact that he has been unable to maintain the power that was his by birthright. The quill moves slowly, each stroke of ink sealing his fate. The parchment is no longer just a legal agreement. It is a moment of personal loss. It is a moment when King John, the once mighty ruler of England, surrenders to the reality that his kingdom will never be the same. The ink dries on the page, and with it, the old world slips away. John steps back, his heart heavy with the weight of what he has just done. The fire crackles in the hearth, but offers him no comfort. The storm outside rages on, its fury matching the turmoil within him. The barons have won. The Magna Carta has been signed. The age of absolute monarchy is over. The silence in the hall is profound, broken only by the sound of the wind outside. The advisors and barons stand in hushed reverence, but there is no celebration, no joy in this victory. It is not a victory for the king, nor for the barons. It is a bitter compromise, a necessary act of survival for the kingdom. King John has signed away his power, but perhaps, in the end, the kingdom will survive. Perhaps the laws of the Magna Carta will bring justice, will bring peace to a land torn by conflict. John stands alone in the hall, his eyes fixed on the parchment. The weight of the moment presses down on him, but as the rain continues to fall outside, he knows that the world has changed. The kingdom of England has been transformed, and the reign of King John, though not ended, has been irrevocably altered. The land of England lies shrouded beneath a heavy, oppressive sky. The clouds roll in like a darkened sea, casting their shadows over the countryside, thick with the promise of rain. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth and damp stone. The wind carries a faint rustling of trees, as though nature itself is whispering of the changes that are about to unfold. Far in the distance, the silhouette of Windsor Castle looms, its great stone walls a testament to centuries of power and rule. But today, it feels as though even the castle itself is on the verge of collapse, standing watch over a kingdom that teeters on the edge of transformation. Inside the great hall of the castle, the flickering light of torches dances on the stone walls, casting long, trembling shadows across the room. The air inside is thick with the warmth of the hearth, but the heat does little to penetrate the coldness that has taken root in the hearts of those gathered. The fire crackles with a strange intensity, as though it, too, feels the weight of what is to come. King John stands at the far end of the room, his figure draped in the heavy regalia of his office. Yet there is something about him now, something lost in his stance, something fragile in his presence. The weight of his crown, once a symbol of power, now feels more like a shackle, binding him to a legacy he can no longer control. Before him lies the Magna Carta, the document that has become the very heartbeat of the kingdom's rebellion. It is unrolled on the table, its edges slightly curled, the ink still fresh but already beginning to darken, as if it, too, feels the gravity of this moment. The words upon the parchment seem to pulse with an authority of their own, as though they are more than mere laws. They are the harbingers of a new order. In the flickering torchlight, the ink seems almost alive, shifting with the movement of the flames, carrying the weight of a kingdom in its strokes. John's eyes are fixed on the document, but they are not seeing it. His mind is elsewhere, adrift in a sea of doubt and regret. He had always been so sure of himself, so convinced that his rule was divinely ordained. But the rebellion of the barons has shown him otherwise. The strength he once relied upon, his military prowess, his inherited authority, has faltered. The kingdom is in turmoil, and with each passing day, the call for justice grows louder. His crown, once a symbol of unchallenged power, now feels like a mockery. He is no longer the king he once was. The throne beneath him seems to tremble, the very foundations of his reign cracking beneath the weight of his failures. The room is filled with the quiet murmur of advisers, the soft shuffle of feet as the barons take their place. The silence is thick with anticipation, with a tension that seems to hang in the very air. These men, once his loyal subjects, now stand as his adversaries. The barons are no longer his allies. They are his accusers, demanding that he sign the Magna Carta, that he submit to the laws that govern the land. The sight of them standing before him, their faces hard with resolve, stirs something deep within John, something akin to fear, but not quite. It is a recognition of the inevitable, the moment when a king's power slips from his grasp, when even the throne cannot protect him. A tall baron steps forward, his face grim, his eyes unwavering. He is a man who has fought in many battles, a veteran of the wars that have ravaged England. His armor is weathered, his sword worn with use. But it is not his sword that commands attention today. It is his voice, steady and firm. "Your Majesty," he says, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years of history. The time for negotiation has passed. The Magna Carta must be signed. The people demand justice. The barons demand justice. And if you do not sign it, we will have no choice but to rise against you. John's chest tightens at the sound of those words. The threat hangs in the air, palpable, suffocating. For a brief moment, his gaze flickers toward the faces of his advisers, his supporters, but they are silent. They do not meet his eyes. They know that the kingdom has changed, that the old ways are gone. They know that John's reign has been irreparably weakened by years of poor decisions, by the crushing taxes, the failed wars, the broken promises. In his heart, John knows at this moment, the signing of the Magna Carta marks the end of the rule of kings who answer only to God. The baron's voice cuts through John's thoughts, sharp and unyielding. If you refuse, your Majesty, it will not be just your barons who rise against you. The people are with us. They have suffered under your reign, and they will demand justice. The words sting, cutting deep into John's pride. His reign has been marked by bloodshed, by the heavy hand of a king who has ruled with absolute power. But now, in the face of the Magna Carta, he is confronted with a new reality, a reality in which he is no longer the sole ruler, in which he is no longer above the law. The barons' demand is clear. They want a king who is accountable, a king who recognizes that his power is not limitless, that it must be shared with those who live under his rule.